elite on the whole, whose lives are shrouded in mystery, and they want to hide their secrets.
Yes.
And
that there are two truths. The first truth is that the conversation, I'm told and I believe.
Tom Bower doesn't write gossip. He builds cases. When he turned his attention to Meghan Markle, the tone inside Montecito shifted overnight. His sources weren't tabloids. They were insiders with receipts, documents, emails, and first-hand accounts painting a different picture of ambition and control. Each interview chipped away at a story the world thought it already knew. And when the pattern emerged, it wasn't about love or race. It was about power, precision, and how far someone will go to rewrite their own myth.
You have extraordinary reporting in your book on what this was likely based on and how it doesn't match up to what Meghan said. Here's the clip, SOT 6, from the Oprah interview.
In those months when I was pregnant.
Consider what this really meant. Tom Bower, the biographer who has made a career of uncovering what carefully managed PR teams would rather keep buried, had turned his attention to one of the most polarizing figures in modern royal history. His findings, according to palace insiders and Hollywood sources, suggest that the carefully cultivated story of Meghan Markle's rise from struggling actress to duchess contains contradictions that raise fundamental questions about authenticity and ambition.
I do, and I think it has divided the nation and made us all, many of us, very unhappy on either side of the argument. I just found that Harry and Meghan, having said that they were setting up in California to spread wellness and love and sincerity, have done the exact opposite.
The timing is important here. As the Sussex brand struggles with failed ventures and mounting public skepticism, Bower's revelations emerge at a moment when credibility has never been more crucial. Netflix partnerships hanging by threads, Spotify deals dissolved, and a lifestyle brand struggling to find its footing, all while the principal architects of this empire face questions about the foundation upon which it was built.
A series dedicated to dissecting the most riveting royal scandals in history. This week, I'm joined by Tom Bower, author of Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors, the defining book.
To understand the significance of Bower's investigation, we need to examine who Tom Bower actually is. This isn't someone who trades in tabloid gossip or sensational headlines. Over decades, Bower has established himself as perhaps Britain's most formidable, unauthorized biographer, with a track record that includes exposés of prime ministers, media moguls, and business titans. His methodology involves extensive interviews with sources close to his subjects, documentary evidence, and a lawyer's attention to detail. He was, after all, trained as a barrister before turning to investigative writing.
He went to Prince Harry and said, you should reconsider.
What makes Bower particularly threatening to those he investigates is his patience. Sources describe a man who will spend months, sometimes years, building relationships with insiders, cross-referencing accounts, and constructing timelines that reveal patterns invisible to casual observers. When he publishes, it's with the confidence of someone who has done the homework. Royal historian Marlene Koenig pointed out that Bower's approach differs fundamentally from typical royal coverage. While others focus on single incidents or palace gossip, Bower examines systems and patterns. His book Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors wasn't just about individual grievances. It was about understanding how institutional dynamics and personal ambitions collided. The pattern revelation that has reportedly caused such distress in Montecito centers on what Bower describes as a carefully orchestrated rise to prominence. According to his sources, the narrative of a mixed-race woman fighting against all odds to succeed in Hollywood before accidentally meeting a prince requires significant revision. Documents and interviews suggest access to elite circles and connections that most aspiring actresses could only dream of. Notice the pattern here. The struggling actress narrative, sources claim, overlooks significant advantages: private education, family connections in the entertainment industry, and early introductions to influential figures. This wasn't someone starting from nothing. This was someone who understood how to leverage every advantage, no matter how small. What's telling is how this recontextualization affects everything that followed. Former friends and associates interviewed by Bower describe a consistent approach to relationships that viewed people primarily through the lens of their usefulness. A Hollywood insider quoted in the investigation noted that Meghan had a remarkable ability to identify who mattered in any room and to position herself accordingly. But there was something else happening that many missed at the time. The same sources describe someone who could make you feel like the center of the universe until you weren't useful anymore. This pattern, they claim, repeated itself from Los Angeles to Toronto to London, Friendships that seemed deep and meaningful would suddenly end when circumstances changed or better opportunities appeared. The investigation into her first marriage to Trevor Engelson reveals similar patterns. Rather than the amicable split described in early profiles, Bauer's sources paint a picture of calculated departure once it became clear that Engelson's Hollywood connections had been maximized and greater opportunities lay elsewhere. The returned wedding rings via mail, a detail that emerged years later, suddenly takes on new significance in this context. Looking back, the signs were there in how quickly certain relationships dissolved. Her father, Thomas Markle, went from being the man who helped launch her career to persona non grata. Former best friend Niniki Pretty, who had been part of Meghan's life since childhood, found herself cut off after expressing concerns about the relationship with Harry. Jessica Mulroney, once described as Meghan's closest confidant, discovered how conditional that friendship was when controversy arose. As biographer Andrew Morton noted in his own research, successful social climbers share certain characteristics: exceptional charm, strategic thinking, and the ability to reinvent themselves for different audiences. What Bauer's investigation suggests is that these qualities, often admired in business or politics, become problematic when deployed in personal relationships, especially within an institution as tradition-bound as the British monarchy. The escalation of Bauer's revelations centers on the courtship with Prince Harry. The official narrative, a blind date, immediate chemistry, a woman who knew little about the royal family, faces scrutiny under Bauer's investigation. Sources claim extensive preparation preceded that first meeting. According to these accounts, Meghan had studied Diana's interviews, understood Harry's vulnerabilities, and recognized the global platform that a relationship with him would provide. Consider the sophistication this would require. If Bauer's sources are accurate, this wasn't a chance encounter but a carefully orchestrated introduction through mutual friend Violet von Westenholz. The claim of knowing little about Harry or the royal family becomes harder to sustain when former friends describe someone who was fascinated by Princess Diana and who understood exactly what dating a prince would mean. The implications extend beyond personal relationships. Palace sources interviewed by Bauer describe growing concern about the speed with which the relationship progressed and the way traditional protocols were bypassed or ignored. Staff members who tried to provide guidance found themselves labeled as obstructive or racist. The pattern of burning bridges that had characterized earlier chapters was now playing out on the world's most visible stage. Royal correspondent Valentine Lowe's parallel investigations corroborate aspects of Bauer's findings. Staff turnover at Kensington Palace reached unprecedented levels. Personal assistants, communications directors, and other key personnel departed in rapid succession. The official explanation that these were natural transitions becomes less credible when the pattern is examined in its totality. The turning point, according to Bauer's investigation, came with the Oprah interview. The claims made during that broadcast about racism, about lack of support, about denied mental health care, shaped public perception globally. But Bauer's sources suggest many of these claims don't withstand scrutiny. The specifics matter here. The allegation about Archie's title being denied due to race, for instance, contradicts established protocols that long predate Meghan's arrival. The claim about passport confiscation doesn't align with documented foreign travel during the period in question. What few people realized was how these discrepancies would eventually undermine the entire narrative. Once questions arise about specific claims, everything becomes subject to re-examination. The walkabout after Diana's death that Harry described as traumatic, was it exploitation or standard royal duty? The conflicts with Catherine, were they about cultural differences or something more fundamental? Bauer's investigation extends into the post-royal period, examining the business ventures and media deals that were supposed to establish the Sussexes as a global brand. The Netflix documentary, the Spotify podcast, the various announced but never materialized projects, all reflect what sources describe as an overestimation of market interest and an underestimation of the work required to maintain relevance without royal status. Industry veterans interviewed by Bauer paint a picture of unrealistic expectations meeting harsh market realities. The initial enthusiasm from streaming services and publishers reflected the assumption that proximity to the royal family would translate into sustainable content. What they discovered instead was that once the royal revelations were exhausted, there was little else to offer. The current state reveals an empire in crisis. Archewell, the Sussex's foundation, has experienced staff turnover that mirrors the pattern from Kensington Palace. Business ventures announced with fanfare quietly disappear. The lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, struggles to establish itself in an oversaturated market where celebrity endorsements no longer guarantee success. Meanwhile, the very relationships that were sacrificed for this new life remain severed. Prince William, according to palace sources, has moved from hurt to indifference. King Charles, despite his natural inclination toward reconciliation, faces institutional constraints that limit his options. The royal family has discovered that it functions quite well without the Sussexes, while the Sussexes struggle to maintain relevance without the royal connection. Harry's position in all of this emerges as particularly tragic. Bower's sources describe a man who genuinely believed in the narrative presented to him, who sacrificed his military associations, his royal role, and his family relationships for what he understood to be true love and freedom. The possibility that he may have been, as one source puts it, a mark rather than a partner, represents a betrayal too fundamental to easily process. Looking at the pattern reveals something more complex than simple opportunism. This appears to be about someone who understood institutional power but underestimated institutional memory. The monarchy has survived for centuries not through flexibility, but through its ability to close ranks when threatened. Hollywood, for all its superficiality, has its own brutal clarity about value and marketability. One could argue that the most damaging aspect of Bower's investigation isn't what it reveals about the past, but what it suggests about the future. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. Credibility, once questioned, requires extraordinary effort to restore. The Sussex brand, built on a narrative of victimhood and truth-telling, cannot easily survive evidence that suggests calculation and manipulation. The broader implications extend beyond two individuals or even one institution. This situation reflects contemporary tensions about fame, authenticity, and the price of ambition. It raises questions about how we evaluate truth claims in an era of competing narratives. It demonstrates how personal relationships become casualties when private lives become public commodities. Whether the relationship can be salvaged remains uncertain. What's clear is that Bower's investigation has shifted the conversation fundamentally. No longer is this simply about whether the Sussexes were treated fairly by the palace or the press. Now it's about whether the foundation of their entire narrative, the love story, the racism claims, the victim status, can withstand serious scrutiny. The response from Montecito has been telling. Rather than point-by-point refutation, there's been silence punctuated by anonymous complaints about motivation and methodology. Legal threats have been mentioned, but not pursued, possibly because litigation would require disclosure that might prove even more damaging than Bower's current revelations. As this saga continues to unfold, certain truths become apparent. Institutions like the monarchy survive because they understand that individual ambitions must yield to collective preservation. Hollywood thrives on novelty, but discards quickly when the returns diminish. And perhaps most significantly, narratives built on selective truth-telling eventually face the inconvenience of complete stories. Tom Bower's investigation represents more than just another chapter in the Sussex saga. It's a reminder that in an age of managed narratives and curated personas, investigative journalism still has the power to reveal uncomfortable truths. The question now isn't whether the Sussexes can respond to these revelations, but whether any response can restore what's been lost. The irony is inescapable. A couple who sought to control their narrative through direct communication with the public now finds that narrative slipping beyond their grasp. The very tools they employed, emotional appeals, claims of victimization, institutional critique, become less effective with each use. Meanwhile, the institution they left behind continues its ancient pattern of survival through silence and separation. What remains is a cautionary tale about the limits of personal ambition when set against institutional power. The monarchy didn't survive centuries by adapting to individual demands, but by requiring individuals to adapt to it. Hollywood's brutal economics care nothing for titles or grievances, only for what sells. And the public, initially sympathetic, eventually develops fatigue with any story that doesn't evolve beyond complaint. Tom Bower, through methodical investigation and careful documentation, has provided something that years of palace statements and Sussex interviews couldn't: a framework for understanding how we got here and why the destination was perhaps always inevitable.